4 years of marriage, 4 years of shared dreams, whispered secrets, and the promise of forever. But in one shocking moment, everything came crashing down. I still remember the day my world fell apart like it was yesterday. The day my husband, my so-called soulmate, walked out of our home and into the arms of another woman. The betrayal was not just emotional, but humiliating. He left me for his mistress, and in that moment, I realized the life I thought we had built was nothing more than a lie. At first, I was numb. The pain of his departure was unbearable. But what hurt more was the feeling of being unseen, unheard. He left me without even a second glance, as if I was nothing. But the truth was, I wasn't nothing. I was everything. Everything he'd wanted once. I was the woman who stood by him through thick and thin. The woman who believed in him even when the world doubted him. And yet, he chose her, the one who had always lingered in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. I thought about staying silent, about quietly nursing my wounds and letting life move on. But the betrayal cut too deep. I had to speak out, not for me, but for the truth. So, I made a choice that would change everything. I decided to reveal my true identity to the world, and as the truth spread, so did my power. I wasn't just a woman scorned anymore. I was someone the world needed to reckon with. The moment I released my story to the public, I saw the impact immediately. The phone calls started, the messages flooded in, and people who once ignored me now saw me. But none of them saw me the way I saw myself. No, this wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my dignity. It was about letting everyone know that I was more than the woman who had been discarded. My husband, who had once called me his one true love, watched helplessly as his life unraveled before him. His mistress, the woman he had thought he could replace me with, was nothing compared to the woman I had once been. And he knew it. He regretted it. Every single moment of it. But regret, as I soon realized, was a dangerous thing. It made people do things they didn't think they were capable of. My husband tried to come back. He tried to win me over with promises of change, of love, of a future he had never been able to give me before. But how could I trust him again? How could I believe that the man who walked out of my life could suddenly see my worth? I know what you're thinking. Isn't it too late for him to fix what he's broken? Well, that's the question that haunted me every single day. Was it too late for him? Was it too late for us? Could a man who betrayed me so deeply truly regret his actions? Or was his regret just a desperate attempt to salvage his own guilt? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that his regret wasn't the answer. My answer lay within me. I didn't need his regret to move forward, but it wasn't just my pride at stake here. I had to face the painful truth that my identity, my reputation, and my future were all tangled up in this mess. So, as my husband begged me to reconsider, I was faced with a choice. Do I give him a second chance? Do I allow him back into my life, knowing he could hurt me again? Or do I walk away for good and continue to rebuild the life I had started to reclaim? You might think it's an easy decision, but it wasn't. Every part of me wanted to scream at him, to tell him I was fine without him. But another part of me, the part that had loved him so deeply, wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, there could be a way back to the love we once had. But no matter what, I knew that the person who had been left behind 4 years ago wasn't the same person standing here today. I had changed, and so had he. But what if he was only regretting losing me because of how it looked to the outside world? What if it wasn't true remorse, but rather the fear of losing his status, his position? Could I trust him again after everything that had happened? Just when I thought I had the answers, the story took a twist. My husband's actions, his attempts to win me back, grew more desperate, more calculated. He wasn't just fighting for my love anymore. He was fighting for his reputation, for his own sense of worth. And as much as he regretted it, I couldn't help but wonder, was it truly the love he had for me that made him regret his actions? Or was it something else entirely? The days passed. The tension between us grew. Every glance he gave me seemed to carry a question. Could we go back to what we had? But I wasn't sure anymore. I had learned the hard way that love was fragile, and sometimes it wasn't worth holding on to when the trust was broken beyond repair. Now, standing at the crossroads of my life, I was faced with a decision that would define me forever. Would I let him back in, or would I walk away for good, reclaiming the woman I had once been and becoming something even stronger? As his regrets mounted and my heart struggled to decide, I was left with a single question. Could I forgive him, or would his betrayal haunt me forever? And as I stood there, unsure of the answer, one thing became clear. This wasn't just his story. It was mine. And I was no longer the woman who would silently suffer in the background. But what happened next? What did I decide? Well, the real story is just beginning, and I can't wait to share it with you. Stay tuned as the days stretched on after my husband's attempt to worm his way back into my life. I found myself trapped in a whirlwind of emotions. On one hand, I wanted to believe that he was sincere, that his regret was not just an act of guilt, but genuine remorse. On the other hand, I couldn't forget the pain, the betrayal, and the hurt he had caused when he walked out on me for his mistress. In the months that followed his departure, I had been through the worst. I had fought with myself, questioning everything I had once believed about love and loyalty. How could someone I trusted so much, someone I had given my everything to, turn their back on me without a second thought? I had lost friends, struggled with the constant whispers behind my back, and even questioned my worth. But in all of that darkness, something remarkable had happened. I found a part of me I didn't even know existed. I found strength. I found courage. I realized I wasn't the woman I used to be, the one who would sit back and wait, praying for things to get better. No, I had become someone who refused to stay quiet, someone who fought for herself. When I exposed my true identity, the world saw a different side of me. They saw the woman who had been wronged but wasn't broken, and it made all the difference. It was as though, for the first time in a long while, people started seeing me as more than just someone's wife. I was a force to be reckoned with. But of course, that wasn't something my husband wanted to accept. His regret, though apparent, wasn't as pure as it seemed. Every time he came to me, every time he apologized, I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't just trying to win me back because of what we once had. He was trying to win me back because he knew the world was watching. His reputation, his image, was at stake, and I could see it in his eyes. He wanted me to forgive him, not just for love, but for the facade he had built around himself. I began to notice how much his actions had changed. He was no longer the man I married, the man who would do anything for me. He was the man who was driven by appearances, by the fear of losing everything he had worked so hard to gain. The way he looked at me now was different. It wasn't filled with love anymore, but with desperation. Desperation to fix what he had, broken before it became public knowledge that he couldn't hold his marriage together. And yet, there was still a part of me that longed for the life we had once shared. The memories of our first dates, the laughter we shared, the late-night talks. We had built something together. How could I just throw all of that away? Could he really change? Could we really fix what had been torn apart so completely? It was during this time of uncertainty that I received a visit from an unexpected source. His mistress, the woman he had left me for. She came to my door one evening, uninvited and unannounced. The look in her eyes was not one of sympathy, nor was it one of guilt. It was cold, calculating. She didn't come to apologize. She came to make her own claim. "You're not the one he wants," she said, her voice icy and devoid of emotion. "You never were." Those words stung more than I wanted to admit. How had I ended up in a situation like this? Why was it that the woman he had abandoned me for felt entitled to come to my doorstep, to stand there and tell me that I was no longer needed? What made her think she had the right to speak to me like this? As if everything I had been through didn't matter. But it wasn't her words that stung the most. It was the realization that for all the talk of regret and remorse, my husband had moved on. He had already made his choice. And yet, here he was, crawling back to me as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't destroyed everything we had built together. That night, after our conversation, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, tossing and turning, thinking about everything that had happened. My mind kept circling back to one thing. He didn't deserve my forgiveness. He didn't deserve a second chance. And yet, my heart ached at the thought of him being with someone else. I wasn't ready to let go, but I knew that if I didn't, I'd be holding on to something that had already slipped through my fingers. I finally made a decision. I would meet with him face to face. No more hiding behind messages or phone calls. I needed to see his face when I told him the truth. When I told him that this was over, that we were over. The meeting was set for the next day. And as I walked into the cafe where we had agreed to meet, my heart pounded in my chest. This was it. The moment that would change everything. I would tell him the truth. I would tell him that I was done. But when he walked in, everything I had planned to say flew out of my mind. The way he looked at me, his eyes filled with hope and regret, made me hesitate. He wasn't just a man asking for forgiveness. He was a man who realized too late what he had lost. He sat down across from me, his hands trembling. "I know I don't deserve this," he said quietly, "but I'm asking you, please, give me another chance. I've made so many mistakes, and I regret every one of them. I never should have left you. You were always the one I loved. And I can't imagine my life without you." His words were sincere, but they felt empty. It was as if he had memorized the script of a man begging for a second chance. But in his eyes, I could see something else: guilt, shame, and a deep fear of losing everything he had worked for. He wasn't asking for forgiveness because he truly understood the depth of his betrayal. He was asking for forgiveness because he couldn't bear the thought of losing his reputation, his status, his life. I wanted to tell him that I was done, that I had moved on, that I didn't need him anymore, but the words stuck in my throat. I had to decide. Did I want to keep holding on to something that had already died? Or did I let go and walk away as I stared at him, waiting for the courage to speak? Something unexpected happened. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his face draining of color. The message on the screen made his hands shake. I leaned forward. "What is it?" He didn't answer, his face pale as he stared at the message. I reached for his phone, determined to find out what was happening. But before I could grab it, he snatched it away. "You need to leave," he said, his voice unsteady. "I'll explain everything later, but right now I need you to go." Something was wrong, very wrong. As I stood up to leave, my mind was racing. What had just happened? What was he hiding? And that was when I realized the story was far from over. Something darker was at play, and I was about to uncover it all. As I walked out of the cafe, my mind was spinning. What had just happened? What was he hiding? I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to this story, something deeper that I wasn't seeing. His behavior, the way he had looked at his phone, the way he asked me to leave so abruptly. It all felt like a game, A manipulation. I needed answers. I couldn't just walk away. Not now. Not after everything we had been through. He had destroyed my trust, left me for someone else. And now he was begging for forgiveness. But what was the truth? What was he really hiding from me? The next few days were a blur. I tried to keep myself busy, to push the thoughts of him and his strange behavior out of my mind. But the more I thought about it, the more I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that he had been hiding something from me all along. It was only when I received a phone call late one evening that everything finally started to make sense. The voice on the other end of the line was unfamiliar, but I could tell it was urgent. "Is this for your name?" the voice asked, a touch of hesitation in it. "I need to speak with you about your husband." My heart skipped a beat. It was the last thing I wanted to hear, but I couldn't ignore it. I was about to learn the truth. The woman on the phone introduced herself as someone who had worked with my husband, a colleague from his company. She explained that just a few days before, he had made a deal with the mistress, the woman he had left me for. They had planned to frame me, to make it look like I was the one who had been unfaithful. They had used my personal life as leverage in some sick, twisted game to destroy me and my reputation. The news hit me like a freight train. He had been playing me all along. The apologies, the begging. It was all part of the plan to manipulate me into forgiving him, to make me think that he was the victim. And the worst part, he had been orchestrating it with her, all while pretending to be the heartbroken husband, trying to win me back. As the truth unfolded before me, the weight of his betrayal crushed me. I couldn't believe how far he had gone. The man I had once trusted, the one I had married and loved, had become someone unrecognizable. The realization that everything had been a lie left me shaken, but at the same time, it was liberating. I had been playing along with his game, letting him control the narrative, but now I knew better. I immediately confronted him. This time, there would be no more games, no more apologies. I told him I knew everything. The phone call, the mistress, the plans to ruin my life. It all came out. His face went pale, and for the first time in weeks, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. "I never meant for it to go this far," he said, his voice trembling. "I never thought you'd find out. I thought I could fix it. It was too late. The damage had been done. He wasn't the man I had married anymore. He had turned into someone unrecognizable, someone driven by power, greed, and fear. The love I once felt for him had been replaced by disgust. "You don't get to fix this," I said, my voice steady but firm. "You don't get to walk back into my life and pretend everything is okay. You've ruined everything, and now you have to live with that. You don't get to control me anymore." I hung up the phone, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace. The chaos, the confusion, the pain, it was all behind me. I had taken back control of my life. Over the next few weeks, everything fell into place. My husband's deceitful actions began to unravel in front of everyone. The mistress, who had played such a central role in this mess, was exposed for what she truly was, a manipulator and a liar. My husband's reputation, which he had so carefully crafted, began to crumble. He was forced to face the consequences of his actions, and the truth could no longer be hidden. As for me, I rebuilt my life from the ground up. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. I learned how to trust myself again, how to trust my instincts. I no longer defined myself by my relationship with him. I had become stronger, wiser, and more confident than I had ever been. The lessons were hard-earned, but they were mine. I had been through hell, but I had emerged from it unbroken. In the end, I realized that sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most rewarding outcomes. Walking away was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but it was also the best decision. I'd ever made. As I moved forward, I carried with me the knowledge that no one, no man, no woman, could ever make me feel small or insignificant again. I was enough, just as I was, and I wasn't afraid to face whatever came next, because I had already overcome the worst. The story wasn't just about betrayal. It was about reclaiming my power. It was about standing up for myself, even when everything seemed to be falling apart. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all.